Welcome to Decades of Horror, the 1970s. This is episode 160.
Gruesome Magazine.
How you doing? I am your host, Doc Rotten, and this is a podcast about horror films released between 1970 and 1979. Each episode, my co-host Jeff Moore and I will tackle another classic or not-so-classic film from this wondrous, groovy, gory, and influential decade. For this very special episode, we are revisiting the podcast episodes of Monster Movie Podcast, which was originally the Doc Rotten horror podcast review show I started back in 2011 and then eventually became Monster Movie Podcast. But in the summer of 2013, we recorded 2 episodes recounting our favorite horror films for each year of the 70s. The Black Saint, Santos Ellin Jr. Joined me for this very special countdown where each of us would go through each year and give our favorite. So basically 20 films in all, 1 for each of us each year. These episodes, tonight will be part 1. Next episode will be part 2. We broke them up originally, so that's how we're doing it here. And these episodes will give birth to Decades of Horror in the 1970s, which then will give birth to the 80s. And for a time, we had the 90s. And of course, Jeff and the crew are doing the classic era. And we love revisiting the old horror films, as if you're listening to this, you do as well. Santos Ellin Jr. Started off as a co-host of the Horror News radio podcast with me, Dave, and Thomas Mariani. And we all became quick friends, and we're looking for any excuse to talk about horror films. And I was doing H&R and the Monster Movie Podcast, and I would have them on regularly to tackle different topics. And Santos and I shared this love for the 70s, so he quickly joined me to tackle this particular set of films. A few years back, Santos passed away, which has been hard to deal with for these past few years, to be honest with you. So it's been interesting to go back and listen to these. It's been difficult in some ways, wonderful in others. So I encourage you to listen through these and just to rediscover Santos, rediscover a love for the 70s. So I'm proud to present to you, the Group Believers, the original podcast as recorded, the top 10 horror films of the 1970s, part 1. And here we go. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, if you want to enjoy more of these, it helps to hit the like button, hit the share button, subscribe, and of course, leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear what your top 10s are. And let us know if this is something that you would like for us to do with the new crew again sometime. We certainly would enjoy doing that. So without any further ado, enjoy this very special podcast. Welcome to the Monster Movie Podcast. Join us this week for the return to the 70s as we take a look at some of the fashion, fiends, and frenzy of our favorite horror films from 1970 to 1979. This is episode 54, recorded August 1st, 2013.
This place is gonna be rotten.
The funeral is about to begin.
I want you to go as quietly as possible. Do not make a sound until I tell you to run.
Kill the brain, and you kill the ghoul.
I can't explain it.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
They feed only on warm. This place is gonna be rotten.
I'm your host, Doc Rotten, and this is the podcast about monsters from the movies. I'm excited about this week. Joining me is my co-host from the official HorrorNews.net podcast, New York's favorite podcaster, Santos Ellin Jr., the Black Saint. How you doing?
I am fine today, sir, and I'm much more excited than you are because I grew up. I am the '70s. I am monster. I'm a monstrous individual, and I love monster movies. And when you came up with this idea, I thought it was so freaking awesome, and I just went right to my computer and I just started cataloging stuff and rewatching stuff and going over stuff, and I've got a boner. Excuse me, but
a 1970s bell-bottom boner. That's awesome.
It is. Sans the bells bottoms, but it is. I'm very excited, and I'm even more excited to hear your opinions on what I have to say about my favorite films of the 70s.
Yeah. So that is going to be interesting, because if you've listened to us on the official horrornews.net podcast, there's a plug there. You've probably heard that Santos and I face off on many horror films of late, right?
On a weekly basis.
Yeah,
generally the kicking boy here. Last night was an example. Thomas wants to slay me.
Oh man. So but you also might have noticed, as you were listening to the podcast, that we both love and cherish and adore the 70s. We love these films, right?
I love them with a passion. I grew up in, I was a child. I was, say, from the ages of 6 to maybe 12, 13 in the 70s. And my dad took me to whatever was playing at our local bijou. It didn't matter what it was. So I was exposed at a very early age to some very crappy exploitation films. And this is where I got my love for this stuff from my dad. It's one of the few things that he's given me that I can actually use. That's made me happy. Besides diabetes type 2, that's another podcast, though.
It is another podcast.
But my dad gave me a love for this stuff, and that I cherish to this day. And I passed it on to my daughters. My son, not so much, but my daughters love it just as much as I do. And it's actually brought us closer together as a family, some of these crappy movies.
Yeah, I mean, I watched most of them. I got to see a lot of them in the theaters, but most of the things in the theaters I got to see were like the Towering Inferno. We went and saw the Earthquake. We saw the disaster films and other things. I even went and saw, the Al Pacino movie, Attica, Dog Day Afternoon.
Dog Day Afternoon.
I saw that. But we saw a lot of the films in the drive-in, because going to the drive-in was big. And then late night TV
was a staple.
They would come on like a year or two later.
Mm-hmm. A lot of these came on. There was a network, WWOR was Channel 9 here. They had the $1 Million Movie, and a lot of these things came on really late at night on Fridays and Saturday and Sunday nights. And I spent a lot of my childhood watching these films on the big screen. Actually, I saw everything on our lists. I saw on the big screen, save for 2 of them, I think. And but I rewatched them again on TV over and over and over and over and over. And I rewatch them now on Blu-ray and DVD over and over and over and over. I can watch them till I die.
I would say on my list, that the earlier ones I saw probably on TV, but the later ones I saw in the theaters. So it was a good time.
It's a great time.
Yeah, and I love these films, and it's also a time where they grew up, because it started out they were still vampires. You'll notice there's a lot of vampires in the early part of our films, and a lot of gothic stuff. A lot of Hammer was still kind of big.
Yes.
And then something kind of changed around 1973, right, Santos? And they grew up. They matured.
Yeah, what film did that? I wonder.
The Exorcist. And then, but those aren't the films we're talking about. We're not going to be talking about Exorcist and Jaws and Dawn of the Dead and Halloween and Texas Chainsaw and on and on.
Should point that out. Not that we don't cherish those films as much as the ones we're going to talk about, but everybody knows about those films. There's nothing more that we can add to that.
Absolutely. So
stuff that we're going to talk about is more, not maybe a couple of them might be obscure, but they're just more off the beaten path, stuff that you might not have heard of before. We think you'll enjoy.
Yeah, so we've decided to do our top 10 a little differently. We're going to go year by year, and each of us has picked out a film to spotlight, one of our favorites for that year, and we're just going to shoot the shit.
Shoot the shit. Shoot it down. The shit's going down.
All right, so let's jump right into the list, shall we?
Well, You go, and I defer to you, my friend. This is your show. You can lead off.
You got it. So 1970. Let's start out with yours. We both have vampires. This is fun.
Yes, we do. And my film is called Count Yorga Vampire. It was written and directed by Bob Keljan, and it starred Robert Quarry and Michael Murphy, who became a pretty reputable actor in the 70s. I think he did a couple of Woody Allen movies, and I don't know if he's still around, but he got fairly big.
Well, he was on TV too, right?
But he wasn't anybody big back then, not in 70 anyway. And I remember I was 6 years old when I saw Count Yorga Vampire in a theater. And I distinctly remember being surprised, even at the age of 6, because I was used to, like you spoke about earlier, Hammer vampires. Basically, Christopher Lee. As far as I knew, there was only one Dracula. There was only one vampire, and that was Chris Lee. There was nobody else. And Count Yorga, Robert Quarry's Count Yorga, was so different. I mean, he had the cape and all. You got to have the cape if you're a vampire. And he had the castle. But he was cool. He was erudite. He was sexy. He didn't glare at you like Christopher Lee did. If I remember correctly, I don't think Chris Lee had a lot of lines in any of his Dracula movies. He might have had one or two. But I expressly remember him just really glaring at people with bloody eyes, bloodshot eyes, and blood dripping down his face from his eyes. He was always angry. Chris Lee was never a happy guy. Robert Quarry's kind of happy. And he socializes. He has parties. He has he mingles with the upper crust over on the West Coast. He's not granted it's at nighttime, but he mingles. He's not what's the word I'm looking at? He doesn't distance himself from people. He's not antisocial. Mm-hmm. And that was so counter what I thought a vampire was supposed to be at the time. He was actually sexy. Women really took to Count Yorga. And Yorga also told you exactly what was on his mind. He told you what he was going to do to you before he did it. He was no joke, man. Chris Lee just wait for nighttime and appear at a window and slowly just lower his face onto somebody's neck. Count Yorga didn't do any of that shit, man. Count Yorga said, "I'm going to fuck you up. I'm going to eat your ass. Your fucking ass is mine." And he did just that, man. He was no joke. And there's scenes in the film that are really, really, that stick to me to this day. One especially where Michael Murphy's, his character's wife, she's been bitten, and she's slowly turning into a vampire. She doesn't understand it yet. And he comes into his home, and he finds her eating their cat. And it sounds kind of silly right now, but when you're 6 years old, and you see a woman feasting on what looks like a really realistic, it was a kitten actually. I was horrified at this. It was really fucked up shit. And scenes like that, and another scene, the end, which I won't divulge. The end was pretty scary for the time. Now it's kind of rote, but back then it was horrifying. And there's another great scene where Roger Corman and an actor named Robert Quarry and an actor named Roger Perry, who you might recognize from some Star Trek episodes. Roger Perry knows what Count Yorga is, and he's trying to get it out of him. And they're sitting in Yorga's living room, and there's no pyrotechnics, there's no violence. It's just them verbally jousting with each other, just trying to pick each other apart with words. And it's so tense, and it's so well acted, and it's so scary. It's a wonderful film. It's a wonderful movie. It led to a sequel, The Return of Count Yorga, which followed the year after, which was also pretty effective, although they ended it pretty much the same way. And just to note, originally this film, Count Yorga Vampire, was a porno movie. It was filmed as a porno movie, and it was called The Loves of Count Yorga, a softcore porno movie, excuse me. And it was called The Loves of Count Yorga. But once they screened it, they decided that it would work better as a horror film without the softcore. And it was released as Count Yorga Vampire. And they made the right decision. It's a really, really good film. I don't hear a lot about it, and I suggest that you see it as soon as you can. I believe it's on Netflix. I don't think it's streaming, but I think you can rent it, get it in the mail. It's a great, great movie.
Yeah, I mean, this launched a little mini career for Robert Quarry. They were grooming him to be the next Vincent Price, the next Peter Cushing, the next Christopher Lee.
It never worked out.
It didn't. Well, like we said, times changed, and that kind of sank it. But between now and 74, we're gonna, you would talk about this guy every year.
That's true. He was in a couple of big pictures. He was. They tried hard. They did try hard, but it didn't work out for him.
So my movie from 1970 is also vampires. It also has a lot to do with Christopher Lee, but because it's from Hammer. This represents Hammer's one of the rare times that he would create a vampire that wasn't Dracula, and it is Ingrid Pitt, starring as Carmilla Karnstein and the Vampire Lovers. And this one, along with Countess Dracula, always struck me. I always really liked. It was always scary for some reason, when the vampire was a female, for me when I was a kid. I think for some reason, the male Draculas, the stereotypical ones, Lugosi and even Christopher Lee, had gotten kind of silly. They had been parodied already and laughed at on TV and stuff. So here comes these women with fangs, and they're they I don't know, there's something about that really got me. And it's and of course Ingrid Pitt is a very attractive young lady. Yeah. And of course got Peter Cushing in it. Love me some Peter Cushing. Anything he's in, I can watch. Directed by Roy Ward Baker. It started a trilogy of films. It would be years before I'd see the other two. But for some reason, Vampire Lovers made it out and about.
Why was it years before you saw the others?
I wouldn't see those in the theaters. I didn't know to go look for those when they came out. Because I was off seeing Planet of the Apes films probably.
Yeah.
And Vampire Lovers made it on screen for some reason, heavily edited, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But still, between that and seeing Infamous Monsters and other books and magazines at the time, you knew quickly who Ingrid Pitt was. And really just, this is a movie that I can end up watching year after year.
Well, once you get a good look at Ingrid Pitt, in various stages of undress, if I remember properly, at least from the waist up undressed, that's something like that, especially when you're young and impressionable, that stays with you for a long time.
Even when it was the low cut blouse. I mean, it didn't have to be nude to affect you. It was like, wow. And then of course the fangs, and she was pretty scary for what she was, yeah. And then Peter Cushing was out to cut her head off, and that was like, holy cow. So yeah, let's move on to 1971, and you give us your spotlight for that year. What film grabbed
1971. 1971 was, for me, the film that I remember the most from that year. It's called The Brotherhood of Satan. And this is a film that I found out just recently. Not a lot of people, I thought it was a lot more popular than it actually was. It actually is. I thought a lot of people had seen this. No one had heard of it when I told them about it. And it just amazes me because it's one of the scariest films I'd ever seen. It's directed by Bernard, I hope I'm saying his last name right, McEvedy. Okay, it starred a lot of familiar faces. Strother Martin, you guys should know from Cool Hand Luke. What we have here is a failure to communicate. It was one of the greatest lines ever. That's from Cool Hand Luke. That's Strother's line. L.Q. Jones, who you saw in a lot of Burt Reynolds movies in the 70s. Alvy Moore, who I believe was in Green Acres, which is a TV show from the 70s. And it was the first film that I saw that expressly dealt with Satan, the devil. And before this, everything I'd seen was, vampires and Godzilla and, Filipino blood monsters. I never really saw something that dealt with Satan. And here, because it was the first time I was exposed to a film dealing with this subject, it made it that much more effective. the plot was pretty simple. It was there's a cult living in a small town, and they're trying to procure 13 kids to form this bridge, sort of like from Earth to Hell. And they needed to get this bridge together to transform the kids into vessels for the older cult members to transfer their souls into. And it turns out that they've repeated this ceremony dozens of times over the centuries to guarantee the cult members eternal life and servitude to Satan. And they need one more kid. They have 12. They need one more, and lo and behold, some family drives up, their car breaks down right outside of town, and they just happen to have a kid with them. And from then on, it just goes straight to hell, man. It's a really depressing, sad, scary, ugly movie, man. There's nothing happy in this one. There's no happy endings. There's very little humor in it. It's just the atmosphere of the film, the aura of the film, the feel of it. It's just overwhelmingly evil. You can't get over how evil the whole thing is, man. It even has a couple of dolls in it, which, if you guys listen to the official horror news podcast, no, I don't really dig dolls so much in any kind of movie. And the Brotherhood of Satan takes all of that and it turns it into just a scary motherfucker of a movie, man. And the ending, there's a final line at the ending. You have to wait for all the credits to end before you get to this final line, and it just chills you to the bone. It chilled me to the bone. It still does. It's disturbing then, and it's disturbing now, man. It's one of the best films of the 70s, flat out. And not a lot of people have seen it. And it's available on Netflix. You guys, not streaming, but you can it can send it to you. And I suggest you guys see it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it seemed like, I want to talk about Strother Martin, because it seemed like he caught a lot of him in the 70s.
He was all over the place, man.
Yeah.
He did. He's in a couple of my favorite films of the 70s, actually.
Well, I remember him from
Yeah.
the Snake movie
That was
with
the other one.
Dr. Stoner, which is a great name.
That's a great movie, too. That's a really, really good movie. And it had some awesome makeup effects back then for the time. He was a true original, Strother Martin was. And there was something about his drawl, about the way he delivered his lines, man. It was a lackadaisical kind of thing to the way he delivered his lines that really made him, every character he played made them very memorable, the way he delivered those lines, his tone of voice. He was a great American actor, and I don't think he gets his due.
I don't think so either. My film from 1971 is, I guess it would have been a low-budget film for the time. I remember catching it on TV late night a few years after it came out, and there's something about this film that just scared the hell out of me. One of the main things that scared the hell out of me about it was the girl under the water. Now, the film we're talking about is Let's Scare Jessica to Death.
Awesome movie.
Yeah, and it's really all about tone. And this girl who's going to go insane, it might be haunted, it might be vampires, who knows. It all comes out in the end, but the story is fascinating, and this girl, Zora Lampert, I guess you should say. I don't remember seeing her in a whole lot of things, but she is so good in this, and she doubts herself and doubts her own sanity as the film goes on, until she starts seeing things for what they really are, and it's just creepy. But the scary thing was out in the lake. Do you remember?
Yeah, with the red-haired chick.
Oh man, and that whole thing just absolutely scared me, and that is something that other films have played on since, and every time I see it, it reminds me of this film.
Other films have played on it, but none of them were really as effective as this one was. This you're absolutely right. I saw it actually in a theater with my dad, and the mood here was so. You were so confused because you didn't know. I didn't know personally. Again, I may have been 6 or 7, and I didn't know if she was crazy or if I was crazy. You're watching the film and you wonder, Is her husband against her? Is he down with the plot? Is what's her name really a vampire? What kind of vampire is she? Is Jessica just losing her mind? I mean, it's established that she had lost her mind, that she had a breakdown rather before the film started, so she was already on shaky ground. And I think part of the beauty of her performance is that she's not she's not an unattractive woman. Let me put it like that. But she's not Ingrid Pitt either. And so it's a part of me wanted to say maybe the husband was just tired of her. Because there was a much better looking, the vampire lady was a lot better looking. A lot sexier than she was.
Much more seductive, yeah.
Yeah, and much more seductive. She had the whole town pretty much wrapped up. And, and like I said, his wife had already had a nervous breakdown. Maybe she was just past her due date. Maybe he was just tired of her. And it sounds cruel, but, shit like that happens. And I think Zora Lampert, she played her face, the madness, the stuff that was going through her mind, it comes through in her performance so well in her face. It's just frightening. And the end of that film is really frightening because you don't know what's going to happen. It's very open-ended, and it just made it more scary for me.
Yeah, and it's full of paranoia and you just don't know who's on whose side, and it just really has you guessing at a lot of different things. But it is about atmosphere. It just has this tone to it, this ambiance of oppression on this character. Who directed it?
Yeah,
John D. Hancock. Yeah, this film feels very, what you were talking about. Nobody feels like Hollywood,
No.
It feels like it's really happening. It's kind of like what today when you see, found footage. A lot of the actors seem real, and this one feels real, but it has a narrative though. It really, really creepy, especially when you start getting out to that lake and out in the woods.
Oh man, yeah, the scenes on the lake, on the canoe, man, they're just too much. For my tender mind, it was way too much. It plays even better at home, though.
It does. I watched it recently. I mean, probably I probably hadn't seen it since the 70s, and about 3-5 years ago, I got it. I bought it on DVD and watched it again, and it was like watching the movie new again. It was just great. I just absolutely loved it. Between this one and Deliverance, man, things coming up out of the water, I was done.
That was another story altogether. It scared me for completely different reasons. That's another podcast.
There you go. We got a couple lined up now.
That's another podcast.
All right, 1972. What is your spotlight?
72. My favorite film, 72, was a fucking terrible, stupid movie called Frogs. Frogs is directed by George McCowan, and it starred Ray Milland, Sam Elliott, and Joan Van Ark, names that everybody knows.
Sam Elliott.
Excuse me?
Sam Elliott.
Sam Elliott, man. Yeah, this is before the big beard and all that other stuff. He's clean shaven, he's young,
he doesn't even have the mustache here, right?
Nope, no mustache, man. He's clean, man. None of that cowboy shit. He's just I don't know what he is, but he's not the Sam Elliott you know now. That's for sure. I should point out right away that the title is sort of misleading because it's really not about killer frogs. It's all sorts of animals in the Florida swamps are getting together and just swiping out humans left and right. You have alligators or crocodiles, alligators, spiders, snakes, lizards. Anything that's crawling, crabs, everything is after you. Now, why does nature strike back all of a sudden? It's postulated in the film that man is encroaching in on the local wildlife, on the swamps where all these animals flourished and were never bothered before, and they all all the wildlife got tired of it, decided to fight back, and as bad as mankind thinks they are, we've got nothing on animals and insects. We have no chance.
Right. It's also about this corrupt family too, and getting their comeuppance.
Well, yeah, because he's very dismissive of what's going on all around him. And his house is right in the middle of the place. It's right in the middle of the swamp. It's defiantly in the middle of the swamp. And Ray Milland's character is an especially crotchety old prick who you just want to see die, actually. You hate him from the minute you see him. Though I did have a smattering of pity for him at the end. Because he's wheelchair bound and he talks a good game, but he can't really do anything. The film is beautiful. It's well shot. The scenery is gorgeous. It has a hazy look to it. You know, like you can feel the humidity coming off the screen almost, man. I was really convinced that something like this could happen. It's a cheesy movie. It's a really cheesy movie. Don't get me wrong.
But in all the best ways. But
I love it. Yeah, it's cheesy in all the best ways, man. It's for me, again, it's legitimately frightening. I mean, it's a scary. And if you look really closely at some of the scenes, like for instance, the alligator scene, one guy gets into a life or death struggle with an alligator or a crocodile. You know, I don't know the difference, honestly. I think it's a crocodile. And if you look really closely, maybe if you have it on DVD and you freeze frame it, you can see like the crocodile's mouth is taped up and stuff like that. And it's a stuntman in there, you know, pretending to wrestle with this thing. Stuff like that kind of kills the mystique. But that's part of the reason why I like it so much. They're not really that careful with hiding their effect work, or their lack of effect work. Rather.
Well, I mean, yeah, and outside of maybe one or two B movies from the 60s, you know, Bees, not a B movie, this is probably one of the first Nature Strikes Back's film.
Exactly. I hadn't seen one actually before this. And this was a great introduction to them. Because it's a scary movie. And again, at the end, I think a theme of a lot of these 70s, the films we're talking about, is that they don't really have pat endings. And this one doesn't have a pat ending. Nothing is solved at the end. As far as I could tell, all the animals are still really pissed off. Just a few people got away at the end. But there was no concrete resolution to the whole thing. Some of the deaths are silly, granted, but most of them are really, really scary, at least to me. And I watched it again about a month ago. I was just rooting around my stuff, and I found I want to see this again. It's been a while. And, you know, I'll be goddamn, but it scared the fuck out of me just as much as it did when I was 7, 8 years old, man. I was...
Hilarious.
It just creeps me out. There's some of the music cues are really cool as well. I can't... On Saturday, I can't tell you who did the music right now, but some of the music cues in the film are really effective. There's some really cool echo effects that go on. And a lot of the scenes of after someone is dead, the McGowan kind of focuses his camera on the corpses for a long time as the animals are still crawling on them. And there's just something really creepy about that, man. Especially when you're in the swamp laying there. And you know what happens to dead bodies in swamps, and your mind starts racing. It's the cheesiest of the cheesy, but it's a great cheesy movie, and it will scare you.
So my film from 1972 is Back to Vampires, Back to Hammer. This is a vampire film that also does not have Dracula, and I wouldn't see this film until the late 70s on one of these, you know, late night TV shows, and it would be very cut. I wouldn't know that until years later, and it would be years later before you even get a chance to see it, because you'd have to get it from overseas. It took a long time for this to even have a VHS in the States, and that's Hammer's Vampire Circus from 1972. And what's great about this is it establishes a whole mythos, a whole world for this vampire family to live in. And it has a 10-minute intro or longer that's a movie in and of itself. Have you seen this film?
Yes, I did, but only one time. And it was way back maybe in 78, 77 on television. So I saw it radically cut and everything.
It is radically cut. There's big scenes in the middle that they sliced out. But even with those cut, it's a striking film. The whole span of the story, so basically, to jump back in, it starts out with Count Minnerhouse, and he is slowly taking over a town, killing off the children with the help of one of the women from the town, a very influential wife, or wife of an influential person in the town, and they do off this guy, and he curses the town, and then it cuts, to 10 years in the future, or even further, and their future, our past, and now the plague has basically cut off the town. The children are dying, which is the curse that he would kill their children. And then a circus comes to town. It gets through the borders, and the circus turns out to be a very supernatural circus full of strong men, henchmen, and vampires. And they are distantly related to Count Minnerhouse, and they're there to resurrect him. And they target the children of the town and seduce them and resurrect Minnerhouse, and for yet another crazy hammer, blood-filled conclusion. And it's a striking film. The Circus of Delights is the whole idea. It's just a great combination of different themes in horror. And for some reason around that time, the circus themes were fascinating me.
Did you go to a lot of circuses as a kid?
Well, not circuses, but the films. I don't know what was, there was like this one, and I can't even, there's like the Black Circus and the Circus of Death and all these different circus films, but they would have this one where the girl's on the spinner rack and the knife guy's throwing the knives at her. Mm-hmm. And I can't even remember the film, and I've actually seen it again. And if I did some Google searching, I could figure it all out, but this is coming off the top of my head. And so, it was just like, this was like, well, this is the best one. Why haven't I seen? And it made such an impression on me. I sought this out in probably the 90s, when the only way you could get it was a bootleg.
Yeah, didn't that just get released like this year?
It did. About a year ago, it finally came out on Blu-ray in the States, and that's actually the first time it's been available in the States. On a U.S. disc in forever. So
uncut, yeah,
uncut especially, yeah. And when I finally got to see the uncut version, which is, even better and far different, the lizard, the snake lady doing her snake dance is phenomenal, and it also has David Prowse, who would become Darth Vader. Yes. And it's silly, it's over the top, but it's just this great oddball vampire story that it doesn't have anything to do with Dracula, and I loved it.
Is it I wouldn't know for sure, because like I said, I saw it cut, and it was decades ago, but I've read that it's really a cut above in terms of violence. Is it?
It is very violent. It's a bit cheesy violence. It's Hammer was having trouble by now. They were having trouble keeping up. They were caving into. They dropped the X rating over in the UK, which means different than it does here in the States.
Right.
They lowered the age restriction on that, so they were able to introduce a lot more gore or a lot more nudity into their horror films without getting banned. And this is one of the results. And so some of it's a little cheesy. Like there's this huge hole in one of the characters. He gets. They're the twins, and when one of the twins gets, they have like a connection, which is a great idea. There's all these little ideas, these little nuggets buried in this film. There's a mirror thing that's in there. Well, anyway, back to what I was saying was the one of them would get stabbed through the chest, right, with this huge stake, and the other one would display the wound, which was really awesome and bloody. But it was a silly big red hole on her chest. But There's a mirror scene where they would go in there and look at the mirror, and the mirror would show a reflection. And they did some, just old-timey camera tricks with that really work, where the vampires would show up. They would be in the mirror, but it wasn't a reflection. So it used mirrors without breaking the mirror rule, which was interesting. And then you'd turn around and they'd be standing behind them, and that would be it. And then the reflections wouldn't be there anymore. So it was really interesting how and it had this intrigue about what why are they there, who are they, and great cast. Thori Walters, you know him, right?
Yes.
Are you familiar with him? He's like this he's got this curly gray hair. It's kind of wild sometimes.
Yep.
And he has this usually a big bushy mustache, and he has this kind of this very British funny comedy way of doing his delivery. Adrienne Corey is in it as the lead female vampire. She would be in she was most people would probably know her from Clockwork Orange.
Right, she was
the
house. She was the
wife, the victim.
The wife of the one that got raped.
Yeah. And she's wonderful, and it's just and Count Minnerhouse was this crazy ass vampire who cursed the whole town. It was impressive. This is one of my favorite films. This is on the top of my list of favorite all-time horror films.
Well, that's something.
Love this one. So let's move on to 1973.
1973. I was 9 years old in 1973, and the film that still to this day really, really scares the shit out of me is called "Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things." It was directed by Bob Clark, who was went on to a lot of success. He directed Porky's. He directed Murder by Decree, I think. He directed a lot of big movies later in his career. And but he started out way back here in 73 with this and another film called Dead of Night, which just missed my list, actually. They're basically both the same year. I couldn't pick them both. It was written by and starring Alan Ormsby. Excuse me?
He also did Black Christmas.
He did Black Christmas. I forgot about Black Christmas.
And before we get too far, we have to say he did A Christmas Story.
Holy crap. Oh, my God. He did A Christmas Story, which every Christmas, I don't know about down by you, but every Christmas, there's a network here that plays that movie for 24 hours straight.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, we watch it every year. I'm so tired.
Yeah. I can watch bits and pieces, but not every year.
But he started out in horror, so...
He started out in horror, and sadly, he was slated to direct a remake of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, when he died in a car accident before he could get off the ground. And I would have really liked to have seen that, because it's very rare that you get a director of the original coming back to do the remake, and I think it would have been really, really cool. This movie, it's really simple, it's really cheap, it costs like $50. and you can see right away that there's not a lot of money here. But basically there's an acting troupe led by a very what's the word I can say? A very fey and dislikable character named Ellin, who's played by Alan Ormsby, who went on to a lot of success as a screenwriter. Actually, he wrote Paul Schrader's the remake of Cat People. He wrote a great film called Popcorn that played in the mid-'80s. He's actually a very good writer. Did a lot of TV work, too. But he brings his little acting troupe over from New York City to this desolate little island just out in the middle of the river there. I don't know what friggin' island is out just outside of New York City, but this one was for this movie. And the idea was they were going to dig up a corpse, because there's a little graveyard happens to be on this island, and perform a ritual just to bust in the new cats, just to see who can make their bones to get into his acting troupe, basically. But it's all a gag, and he has a couple of guys already on the island set up to pop out of a grave and scare everybody. What they do, they get there, and everybody goes through their shtick, and the joke is played, and everybody gets scared, and then they think it's over. But Ellin says no, they actually are going to dig up a grave and pull out a corpse and perform the ritual, and they do. They even give the corpse a name. They call him Orville. And he reads some incantation out of this book that he digs up from somewhere. And it turns out that it's not a joke. And he actually manages to resurrect the dead. And they're pissed off. And they're hungry. Because dead people are always hungry in these movies. And they don't eat anything but other living people. So it turns into a Night of the Living Dead sort of flick. And it's a siege. They're locked up in a house in the middle of the island, and they're being attacked by dead people. Everything about the movie is really 70s. The wardrobe especially. When you watch the film, you see what they're wearing. It's hysterical. It's really funny, man. One guy has on some tight striped blue and white striped jeans, bell-bottom jeans, and a reddish purplish shirt that stripes are going the other way. It's horrible, but I guess it was cool back then. It's really bad. It's a really bad fashion-wise film to look at, but back then I guess it was really hip. The cheapness of it works, though. It's all very pervasive. It feels down and it feels dirty, man. The acting isn't great, but it's effective. It works for what they're trying to do. Slowly, one by one, everybody gets picked off and, chewed up. It's not especially graphic, though. There's a fair amount of bloodshed in it. What's really effective about it is Ormsby's performance as Ellin, because he's just a prick. He's just a prick from the get-go, and you want to see him get it. And at the end, there's only two people left, him and his wife, who was actually played by his wife. Her name was Anya Ormsby. And rather than get, killed by these zombies, he throws his wife to them. And there's a great scene. They're on a stairway. And he takes his wife and he throws them to these zombies at the bottom of the stairs. And they all stop. The zombies actually stop. If you take a good look, the zombies stop. They catch her and they stop and they look at him in amazement. Like, you threw your fucking wife at us, you prick. You wouldn't. It's such a great scene, man. Before they take her and tear her to bits, of course. But they take that second to look at him, and they're stunned that someone could be so low down. And he runs up to his room, alone. They're coming for him. There's really nothing he can do. And God damn it, I don't know if I should give away the ending, because I want people to see this. Let's just say that the body that he dug up in the beginning of the movie, they forgot all about, that comes back to bite him in the ass. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderfully, wonderfully atmospheric movie. It's cheap as hell, like I said, and it has a great ending. After this scene that I just described, something happens right after that tells you that the nightmare is just beginning. He doesn't know how big a fucking Pandora's box he's opened. Right. And at the end, you see it. And it's really, really, to this day, man, I can watch that movie, and when that end comes, man, I get goosebumps. I just got them. They're literally on I swear to God, I get a chill, man, down my spine. It's so effective. It's so scary. It's so low budget. The low budget works so well for this movie. There's only a couple of movies that I could think of that low budgets really work in their favor, like Carnival of Souls, for instance. That was like, that cost like $20, but that worked for it. It just made the film that much more effective, because you had to go with whatever practical effects you could dig up, and maybe not the greatest acting in the world. So a lot of the power of the movie is from the atmosphere. And this has atmosphere up the wazoo, man. It's a wonderfully, wonderfully scary movie. Don't be fooled by the poster art, which makes it look sort of like a comedy. It's not. It's nothing funny about this fucking movie at all. It's a scary motherfucking movie. You guys will love it.
Yeah, this is definitely a cult classic. People, I would wager that many people have not seen it. They may have heard of it because the title is so unique, but I would say many people have not seen this film.
Right, and the title sounds like a joke too. Actually, it's not it's not funny. It's a scary movie, and I think it's streaming on Netflix. I think you can get it on Netflix too, but if you can't, just buy it, man. You can buy it.
Yeah, it shows up again every once in a while. They rotate this one in and out, but it's the people at first are a little hard to stomach. You know, you have to kind of wager into the group. They're a little annoying at first.
They're very annoying.
Yeah,
they're extremely annoying. But you got to sort of surrender yourself to that,
right?
To get to the meat and potatoes of the movie. Because remember, they're an acting troupe, and none of them can really act, whether in real life or in the movie, as a troupe, as their characters. So you kind of sort of got to just get over that hump. But once you're over it, once you just accept them for what they are, and just let the movie do its thing, it won't matter. You won't realize it after a while. You'll be too scared to worry about that.
Yeah, once it kicks in, once they do the actual ritual, it is a different film after that. One thing, my film from 1973 is a little bit of a cheat.
Why is this?
Only slightly. My film is Scream, Blackula, Scream from 1973. Now, I probably would have picked Blackula over it, but I really do like the sequel. And there's a number of reasons. The biggest reason is Pam Grier, who I absolutely adore in this film. The second one is her character is a voodoo queen, and that element into this film is very interesting and makes the film much different, even though it has the same tone and the same actor and the same roughly the same story. It has that element in there that makes it different because of the voodoo dolls and her story and her background and the characters that evolve around her or revolve around her, and the attraction between William Marshall and Pam Grier is strong. And
it's palpable.
What's that?
It's palpable on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, you see the reason why, he takes the chances and risks and wants things to happen with her. So, and you see, her motivations are clear and conflicted. And then you have a couple of sub characters that have some interesting things going on. Richard Lawson's character, Willie Daniels, is hilarious. And his, he basically suffers being underneath of Blackula, Prince Mamuwalde.
Yes, most definitely. I love that name, by the way. Prince Mamuwalde is just a great name for a vampire.
Now,
Mamuwalde.
The first Blackula is a little bit more influential and has a little bit more tone, but this one is taking that and actually tweaks it and makes it a better film. To me, this is the better film. I love Scream, Blackula, Scream.
I gotta disagree with you. I like the film, don't get me wrong, but it can't hold a candle to Blackula. Blackula is just legitimately fucking scary, man. Blackula almost made my list too, because Blackula had some shit going on in there, man. Blackula was something else. This one, I had a couple of issues with. Well, first of all, Pam pretty much stays dressed throughout the whole movie. So that, right there, I got a problem. Because,
okay.
I got to see, I need to see some Pam. Other movie, I see some Pam. I need to see some more Pam. Secondly, if, my whole thing is if Mama Waldy doesn't want to be a vampire, then where's the suspense? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, that's what was lacking in this movie. Yeah, and I really didn't like the ending. It seems like they just gave up at the end.
You think?
I don't know.
You think?
It's so.
I mean, after all that chasing around the house and.
Yeah, but the end. It just ended. It's just like. Think about it. They never filmed a follow-up to this, and the ending for this definitely left lots of doors open to them, and they didn't. They just sort of. It's almost as if it's almost as if the screenwriters, they started asking themselves the same questions I just asked, because I felt like they just gave up at the end of the movie. It just didn't work. It has its moments, though. It has its moments, especially with the vampires on wheels things, man. The ghouls on the ghouls. I love the. There's a scene in Blackula and in Scream Blackula Scream where Mama Waldy sort of glides across the floor, man.
Oh, yeah.
And like he's on scan. Those are really scary, man. Part of the effectiveness, like you were talking about, the relationship between the two characters is a testament to the acting chops you had here. And Pam Grier is just a very, very underrated actress. Like I said, she didn't take off her clothes, and that's basically what I would remember her for. But she's a really, really good actress, and the scenes with Grier and Marshall with that voice, he just commands every scene he's in, and there's legitimate fireworks between him and Pam Grier. But I didn't think the film was all that scary, and like I said, the ending was just so. It felt just hollow to me. It just felt like it ended, like they quit.
Well, I always liked the Richard Lawson character for some reason, and Willis Daniels is the character, Richard Lawson is the actor.
He knew how to wear a hat, man. Yeah,
he knew how to wear a hat, and he had that 70s thing going on. He had a little bit of the cliche, but he worked it. I mean, it's where that kind of cliche works. You know where I remember him most from, though?
Go ahead.
Poltergeist.
Excuse me?
Poltergeist. He's in Poltergeist.
Oh, right. He was the guy. He was one of the paranormal investigators.
Yep.
You're right. Oh man, I forgot all about that. See, it's like I don't connect the name to the face. I just see the face, but you're right. He was the paranormal investigator, one of those guys. Whatever happened to him?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
He's still around?
I think so. So you don't like my choice for 73?
I think there are far. Look, again, this is a strictly personal. This is our personal choices. I can't.
Right.
I'm not going to take away your personal. I just think there were far better films.
Sure. So you're going to follow that up with what you chose in 1974.
Okay. It's my turn. It's my turn to get raked over the coals. My choice for 1974 is a film I'm almost positive no one has seen, maybe except for Doc. And it's called Shriek of the Mutilated.
Shriek of the Mutilated.
Let me say that again. Shriek of the Mutilated.
Oh, me. And if you haven't seen it,
title like that,
please don't see it.
With a title like that, how can you go wrong, right? You've got the title. You've got the greatest freaking title that you can possibly drag up for a horror movie. How could you go wrong? These guys went completely wrong. They went so wrong, it's not even funny. But I love this film. Why do I love this film? First of all, I should point out that it can be found under a bunch of different titles. All dealing with Bigfoot. Legend of Bigfoot, Capture of Bigfoot, Bigfoot Hunt. It's all kinds of Bigfoot titles. You can find it under a lot of titles. And you'll be very upset if you pick it up thinking that you're getting a Bigfoot movie. Or that you're getting anybody shrieking, before they get mutilated. Because you don't get any of that in this film. What you get is a really, really bad movie about some college kids who are led on a wild goose chase by their professor in a search for a Yeti who's apparently killing people just outside of their town, which is really odd because I don't know too many towns with a legitimate Bigfoot, right outside of where there's really no panic because no one in the town seems to care that there's a Bigfoot out there. And oh man, long story short, it turns out that there is no Bigfoot. It's just a man in a suit. And the college professor is actually the head of a cabal of cannibals. And they're just looking for some fresh meat. And the students happen to be it. Everything about Shriek of the Mutilated screams, what the fuck? It's an ugly movie. It doesn't look good. The acting is god-awful. The special effects don't exist. There's no gore, very little gore at all. It's just a bad movie. But when I saw it, again, this is me as a child, I saw it on television, and it struck a chord with me, man. I had no idea that, of the twist, that, there was no Bigfoot. There was just a bunch of cannibals. And as a child, that really kind of fucked me up, man. That just scared the shit out of me. I was really, really scared. And granted, the Bigfoot suit, when it turned out that it was just a guy in a suit, I was a little disappointed because I was expecting to see a big, frothy, white Bigfoot, and I didn't. But the idea of cannibals, the idea of a bunch of students being chewed down upon by their professor and his pals, really scared me. And the last line of the film is especially cheesy, but it left a chill with me, and I found it really effective.
No.
Yeah, I did, man. I was a kid. What can I say, man? I was a kid. It was just it's not genius. It's never gonna win any awards. You're never gonna see it, or you're never gonna hear about it in a list of even bad movies, because it's worse than bad. Michael Findley, the director, he did a lot of cheesy 70s stuff, horror films in the 70s. And his wife, Roberta Findley, actually did a lot of the softcore porn and really bad horror films. The most positive thing I could say about this film, besides the fact that I love it for what it is and not what it claims to be, is that originally, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a tune. It was a big hit in the 70s called Popcorn. And it was an instrumental tune, and I think it was the first instrumental song that was used, that a Moog synthesizer was used for a pop song. And they actually used this song in this movie just before it became a big hit. I think it became a #1 hit. It was by a band called Hot Butter. And it's out there. If you find it, you can find it on YouTube. It's actually a pretty cool tune. And it was used in this film. When the movie was released on VHS, tune was still in there in the scene. It was in the party scene that you hear it. Afterwards, when it was released to DVD, they cut that song out completely. It was licensing rights and all this and all that. And I thought it was amazing that a film so bad, so utterly nothing, could be that important to someone to pull that song off of it, because they weren't making money, the money that they were supposed to be making. I know whoever wrote that song, whoever performed it, regretted its inclusion in this film. Maybe that's why it's not there. Maybe that's not it. But it's just, again, it's my Scream Blackula Scream. There you go.
All right. Well, mine from 1974 is interesting because I didn't see it until probably the 90s. I probably didn't even know knew it existed. It is, and I'm not sure too many people know it exists now. It's it's part of the blaxploitation series of films that Blackula was a big part of, and they had Blackenstein and all kinds of these things that that was great for actors in the 70s because it gave them a venue to get noticed and get out there. But this one, it brings a couple of familiar cast members. It has Robert Quarry is in this one. This is one of his last horror films. Richard Lawson is back. Mm-hmm. It has one of the sexiest ladies of the 70s. It only did a few films. Marky Bay.
Marky Bay.
I love this girl.
Just her name. Her name is sexy.
Yeah, and it also has Don Pedro Corley as Baron Samedi.
Yes.
And it's a revenge / zombie / voodoo film called Sugar Hill. Directed by a one-time director, but a producer of many films, including, and most notably, Police Academy, the entire series of films.
Paul Maslansky.
And this film, it has one of the most creative, low-budget zombie designs I think I've ever seen.
Ever. Yes, it sure does.
very moody, very anti flesh-eating ghouls.
Yep. They weren't hungry,
which is very interesting and very appealing. After you see years and years and years of flesh-eating ghouls, they basically have these ping pong ball eyes.
Ping pong balls. That's it.
And it looks surprisingly effective and creepy. Bulging white ping pong ball eyes, and then covered in cobwebs.
Cobwebs.
And pasty makeup.
Kind of a grayish tone to them. Yep.
Yeah, and they're very, very effective. There's the Baron Samedi character is also very
scary.
And scary. Yes. And the whole, she basically, her husband is kind of involved in the mob, this mobby kind of family that's led by Robert Quarry.
Mm-hmm.
And he is mysteriously murdered and disappears. And she basically, it's being covered up. She kind of figures it all out and gets revenge by hooking up with some voodoo goings on, and makes a deal with Baron Samedi, and who is a big voodoo legend in Louisiana, right?
Yes.
And it's not just made up for this film; it's actually based on the legend.
Legit, actually, yeah.
And it's a damn effective film. It's really fun and really has a great atmosphere. And Marky Bay has basically two personalities in this film, and each one is sexy in its own right. And then you got Robert Quarry being sleazy as he can be, and I I just love this film.
Oh, listen, I'm with you 100%, man. Sugar Hill is it's got everything going for it, man, and when it shouldn't. If you read the synopsis and if you're looking at a still or the picture of her zombie hitman, like the poster calls them, you're going to say, that's stupid, that's not anything. But if you sit down and watch the movie, it grabs you right away. It grabs you by the collar and it doesn't let you go, man. And the zombies are really, really scary. They're really scary, man. They don't eat you. They just do her will. They just get you.
Yeah. Well, they are the last of the voodoo zombies. I can't think of a film that has, the voodoo type.
I can't think
maybe
of one.
Creepshow in a way.
Yeah.
In a way, but not like this.
But nothing like this. Nothing like that. And Marky Bay. Again, every time I say that name, man, it's just the hottest fucking name. Just God. Her outfits in the movie, man. She knew how to dress.
Oh my God!
And I mean, the woman was a goddess. She really was, man. She was all kinds of sexy, and she could have had me in a second, man. She could have sicked her zombies on me anytime. Just let me look at you for a couple of seconds, because she's. I don't know what she did afterward.
She didn't do much of anything. That's the shame. Is that. She she did one more film, and then she did some TV, and then in 1979 she didn't do anything else. She's still alive.
Oh man, she's such a beautiful woman, and she's a good actress. I mean, she's really good in this movie. I can't say I've never seen her in anything else, so I don't know if she's actually a good actress or if it was just this film that she just clicked.
She's great.
But there's nothing bad about this movie.
Yeah, I would say if anybody remembers her, they would remember her from Starsky and Hutch. She played Officer Minnie Kaplan.
I never watched that. I never watched that show.
Yeah.
I wasn't a big television guy back then, unless it was horror based. But again, she leaves once you see her, you can't forget her. And once you see this movie, you can't forget this movie. It's just a kick-ass movie. It really is.
And with that, we come to the end of part one of our trip down memory lane to the 70s. Santos and I basically got together and we talked for about 2.5 hours, which I've decided to cut into two. Right here, you get 1970 through 1974 today with this podcast. In next week's podcast, episode 55, you'll get 75 through 79, and there's lots of fun stuff, including a little bit of a hint here, my favorite horror film, or one of my favorite horror films of all time, especially the 70s, and Santos's favorite horror film of all time, especially the 70s. Going to be exciting. Can't wait for that. Come on back for the second half next week, and we'll see you then. Here's a little outro that we recorded. I'm going to play it in both episodes, where you can find both of us on the internet. See you soon. So where can we find more of you on the internet?
Oh, at Facebook at The Black Saint HNN. At Twitter at TBS Says You, and on Pinterest at Santos Ellin Jr., and Letterboxd at The Black Saint, all one word.
And you can find more of me at DocRotten.com, of course, over at HorrorNews.net. And you can find me at Facebook, Dr. Rotten, and at letterboxd.com/DocRotten. That's wrapping this up really quickly. Santos, we should ask people to write in and let us know if we want to talk more about the 70s, right?
I would love to hear feedback from you people, especially after they've tried some of these films out. And
ooh, yes.
Their opinions, see if they agree or disagree with us.
All right, well, let's say goodbye and let's come back another day.
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
That would be cool.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Peace. Love.
This place is gonna be rotten.
The funeral is about to begin.
I want you to go as quietly as possible. Do not make a sound until I tell you to run.
Kill the brain, and you kill the ghoul.
I can't explain it.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
They feed only on warm. This place is gonna be rotten.